Okay, now that we have learned how to classify whether things are living or not, we are now going to go into specifically what is a cell. So our essential question for today is how do you tell the difference between the different types of cells? Okay, so this goes with learning target 6. We're going to analyze and interpret data and models on the different types of cells, their structure and function. So after our notes and our practice, you will be able to look at different types of cells, be able to identify what their job is, how they're shaped, and how that helps the cell based on your data. Okay, so let's first start off with talking about what an organism is. So pretty much any living thing that is made up of cells is an organism. So we're going to start using that term a lot to describe anything that's living. We're going to call it an organism. Okay, we mentioned this in the last set of notes, that structure. Structure is the shape. It helps determine the job. So each cell has a specific job. For example, a muscle cell is long, and so it can be able to contract and relax and help for movement. So the muscle cell is going to be a lot longer than, say, a blood cell, which is going to be circular in shape. A nerve cell is going to look very different because it's going to have to be able to send and receive. So it has what we call really long dendrites, and you will actually see that in a lab that we do. Okay, so if you take a look at this first picture, that's a muscle cell. When it's stretched out really long, it has to do that so it can contract and relax. And then when it's contracted, it changes its shape. So shape of a cell determines kind of what it does, what a cell is able to do. This other picture is a picture of a nerve cell. It's a really weird looking cell. So if you look at all, it looks like kind of a spider web. Those are the dendrites that have to receive information from other cells, from other nerve cells. So it's going to look very different because its job is different than a muscle cell. So cell structure are going to be different. They're going to have different shapes because what the job they perform is going to be different. Okay, so again, function is the job a cell performs. So just like we were talking about with a muscle and a nerve cell, their shape is different because their job is different. So the shape of a muscle cell is long because it has to contract and relax. Nerve cell looks kind of like a spider web because it has to send and receive messages. Same thing, a cell is a part of the cell. It's going to look very different. The nucleus is going to look very different from another type of organelle in the cell. Okay, so now we're going to get into two main types of cells. So we classify cells in two big categories. They're either prokaryotic cells or eukaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells have no nucleus, so they don't have anything that kind of directs the cell and tells the cell what to do. All its genetic material is in what we call the cytoplasm. Now don't worry if you don't quite understand what a nucleus or a cytoplasm is, because we're going to get to that a little bit later. Prokaryotic has fewer parts to the cell. That's also called organelles. And they're also called one-celled organisms, meaning the living thing is only made up of one cell. We are not made up of one cell. We have trillions of cells in our body. But really tiny living things like bacteria and protists that you have to look at a microscope in order to be able to see them are only made up of one cell. They're not as complex. So we classify them as prokaryotic cells. And then again, in a lab, you guys are going to actually get to see that. Most living things are going to be eukaryotic cells. These are cells that have a nucleus. They have genetic material inside the nucleus. They have more parts to it, or more organelles, and eukaryotic organisms are made up of many cells. So if you take a look at the picture below, on your left-hand side is a prokaryotic cell, on the right-hand side is a eukaryotic cell. So you can see right there, the eukaryotic cell has way more parts to it than a prokaryotic cell. They're showing you what's inside the cell. Okay, so if you look in the eukaryotic cell, that purple object, that's the center, that's the nucleus. The prokaryotic cell doesn't have anything like that. All its genetic material is just floating around in the cell. The genetic material in a eukaryotic cell is inside that purple nucleus. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of just how they're different. Prokaryotic cells are also usually smaller than eukaryotic cells. That's what they're showing you on the scale. Give me 1 second to get that back. There we go. Okay, so just to give you two more terms, whenever we talk about one-celled organisms, we call them unicellular. So again, that's the bacteria. Our protists can be unicellular. This is a picture of some protists. They're only made up of one cell. Now, if you notice, these look very different. The cells don't look alike. Okay, their structure, their shape is very different. That's just because their job is different. Their function is different. Okay, so unicellular means one cell. Multicellular, which is what humans are, we are more than one cell thick. So we have a lot of cells. We have trillions of cells in our body. And then the last thing you're going to want to write down is basically what an organelle is. So inside the cell, I've already talked about a few of these, like a nucleus, cytoplasm. These are what we call organelles. These are structures inside the cell that perform a specific job. So we're basically going to take a cell, open it up, and see what makes up a cell, what are the different jobs that the cell can perform. The different jobs that a cell can perform is based on its organelles. And that is what we're going to end with today.